friends, Beck the Feminist Lawyer here, and y'all know I gotta come on and comment on what the SCOTUS just did to affirmative action when it comes to admissions to institutes of higher education. Just to sum it up, the Supreme Court, minus Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who recused herself rightfully, just decided that Harvard and the University of North Carolina could no longer use race as a determining factor as to who they admit to the school. And of course, this is going to apply across the board to all institutes of higher education. And I could sit here and get into the legal nitty-gritty of all of this, but I think it would be more important to share my personal experience with this issue. If you've been following me for a while, you might know that I grew up in Northwest Georgia. So in a very white populated area, middle upper class county in Georgia. And I was indoctrinated with a lot of the whitewashed history, a lot of white supremacy, a lot of religious rhetoric. And I came up as somebody who called herself a conservative, called herself a pro-lifer. And I actually in college, I was the vice president of the pro-life club at my first college. This is the shit that I was getting taught at school. And eventually, I decided, in college, I sort of started to kind of come away from it a little bit because I had some good professors that were, trying to break through my thick head. But still, my college was mostly, middle to upper class white Southerners. So it wasn't quite enough to break through. And shoot, I hung out with a lot of people, from the LGBT community, a lot of people from, Black community, a lot of other BIPOC. And of course, that's a difficult conversation. It's not up to them to try to help change my mind. So, I still have that very deeply seated in me. I just didn't realize that I had been taught everything wrong. So then I went to law school. I was given a scholarship to what was at the time the most diverse law school in the country, St. Thomas University down in Miami Gardens, Florida. Holy crap, what a different world. I showed up still I was calling myself a libertarian. I was still, really trying to push religion on the law. There was a lot of white supremacist lessons that had been ingrained pretty deeply in me, coming up my whole life. I wasn't quite awake yet, but I got to law school and I was surrounded by people that came up in totally different environments from me. I was exposed to more Jewish people than I had ever known. More Latinos, the Latinx community. I was exposed to a lot of folks, because we were near Miami, a lot of folks from Cuba, a lot of folks from Puerto Rico, a lot of, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, a lot of the LGBTQ community. And my mind was forced open by my interactions with these folks because it humanized something that had not been humanized for me before. And I'm an intelligent person. I have 2 law degrees. I was a law professor. I am a decently intelligent person capable of self-reflection and critical thinking. But because I was so deeply ingrained in entrenched rather is the better word, in all of this white supremacist, Southern rhetoric, all of this, whitewashed history, the heavy religious influences, I didn't really have the chance, the safety, or the opportunity to look at myself and look at what I believed and look at the world and see the facts of, the implications of these things that I was purporting to support. And so I took classes like constitutional law, like criminal procedure, criminal law. I took things like international law. I studied international law extensively. I studied international human rights law. I took a lot of classes about the United Nations. And suddenly I'm looking at this world that looks completely different from the one that was handed to me in my educational experience all the way up until I went to law school. I didn't learn about the Tulsa massacre until law school. There is no reason that any American citizen should make it all the way through high school, all the way through college without learning that a prosperous Black community was absolutely massacred by a group of terrorist whites that just didn't like the fact that they were succeeding and making money. I didn't realize that Lake Lanier here in Georgia has a town under it. It was a prosperous Black town that was flooded by the white supremacists in power because they didn't like that Black people were prospering. I lived right there, and I didn't know any of this because I wasn't taught any of it. I wasn't exposed to people who lived it, to people whose ancestors lived it. And finally, when I got to law school, I swear it was like a 180 in my brain. I had to look around at the world, look around at my friends who were these beautiful people from different cultures, telling me these stories of who they were and where they came from and their experiences. And it was so foreign to me, and it shouldn't have been. I should have been able to encounter all of these stories, all of this rich, beautiful tapestry of communities and experiences, and be able to look at the world from a factual perspective, from a well-rounded perspective, well before I ever reached a postdoctoral level education. And it was the diversity in my school that I have to thank for that, and the very, very patient people who took the time to sit me down and talk to me and say, Beck, you've been taught a lot of stuff that's not right. And I really need you to listen to me and my experience and let me tell you what the world really looks like when you're not in white supremacist North Georgia and they're selling you a whitewashed version of history. People were patient with me. They opened my mind a little bit at a time. They asked me really great questions. And because I'm a person of decent intelligence, I was able to look in at myself, look in at what I had been taught, look at the world, look at the facts, and change my positions on things. But if I had been in a pipeline, like many of the people that I grew up with were, where you go to a white supremacist elementary, middle, high school, and then you go to a college where you have absolutely no diversity, they're going to end up graduating with like damn degrees in biology thinking they know something about the world, when in fact all they have is this whitewashed perspective, and they're blind to the disenfranchisement of BIPOC and LGBTQ people. And they think that everything's equal and everything's fine and God bless America because, you know, everyone has equal opportunity, and they don't know anything about the difference between equity and equality. So if this is allowed to stand, then education will suffer. Our country will suffer. I have personal experience with how valuable diversity in education is. It changed my life. It changed the trajectory of where I was going with my life. It changed who I was. It broadened my mind and my heart. And I'm a completely different person from the person I was before I was exposed to the amount of diversity that I was able to experience in both my JD and my LLM institutions. So if anybody has any doubts about why it is valuable to count race among the reasons to admit somebody to a university, this is it. I mean, I'm in it right now. If my whole college had been white, I would have been running around preaching all the wrong shit and not knowing what I was doing in the world, not knowing what the facts were, being blind to other perspectives. And the fact that we in the United States are going to allow people to go through multiple levels of degrees and multiple levels of education without being forcefully exposed to varying cultures and varying experiences, that's not education. It's not real. It's indoctrination. Stay safe out there, friends. Keep fighting the good fight.